advisory committee to vet out all the applications for architects and make a recommendation, as opposed to either commission or the E911 advisory board doing that. I think that will make our life easier, and you know, these guys, we've had a conversation about the advisory board before, and you know, we're all great guys on there, but we really don't know a lot about what we're doing. I mean, you know, the subject on the district board, the advisory board really is the meat and potatoes. They know what's going on, what they need, so that is the place to do it, I think. And so they will be doing that and then making a recommendation to the district board. So
I'll kind of jump in now. My name is Lee Moore, and I'm with 911 Consult. As Steve alluded to, I have grown up in the industry. I'm an engineer by trade, but I spent 10 years as a volunteer. I enjoyed the conversation earlier this afternoon. I can speak as a volunteer. I've been there. I spent 11 years on a local 911 board as the vice chairman and their technical consultant. And in 2004, we in Elmore County designed and installed the first of what's referred to as the next generation of 911 equipment in the United States, believe it or not. Alabama struck again, first for E911. So Elmore County actually had the first of a new IP-based 911 system that was installed in the United States. After it was over, I realized that I knew more about it than the average bear, and people who were paying a lot of money to put it in. It sounds like something fun to do. So I've been consulting full-time since 2004, doing things exactly like this for districts all over the Southeast. Most of my clients are in Alabama. I range from the two largest clients and three largest 911 districts in the state, Huntsville, Mobile, and Tuscaloosa are clients, to the two smallest, Coosa County and Perry County were the very last two counties to go enhanced 911 less than 2 years ago. So I kind of cover the range of size and opportunities we have in there. We're currently working on 5 construction projects right now. I've had these exact same conversations at Tuscaloosa with the Tuscaloosa Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, and the City of Northport. They are looking at doing a joint facility and bringing their EMA into it as well. After the events of the tornado destroyed their EMA facility, they've been living out of the basement. They have to do something there. And for other reasons, not only because of that. We broke ground last week in Macon County. We're in the design phase in Chambers County. Elmore County is just about to release bid documents. So people have been saving their pennies for a long time, and for whatever reason, there are lots of opportunities for construction projects and quite a bit of opportunity for consolidation of facilities. I am from Montgomery, that place in the state where all the legislative joy happens, and I can assure you that the tenor of the conversations that are going on, not only from the state level, but down into our little world of 911, center around efficiency and consolidation of services. The current administration is looking within the state organizations and consolidating, as you're all very well aware of, for that. They are increasingly asking state affiliated agencies, even though we are not technically in the 911 business a state agency, we're a political subdivision of the state, to look at spending the dollars wisely and make sure that you have taken all of those things into account to look at efficiency and where do we save money. Having an opportunity to do a facility where you bring people in over the long term is where they want you to go. So I can assure you that you're moving in the right direction as far as the political winds that are blowing right now. You may or may not be aware that there were some changes, significant changes made to our 911 law last year. The examiners of public accounts will now be auditing all 911 districts on a biennial basis. So there's a bit more scrutiny out there as to, is it not only proper, is it efficient, is it the best you can do? Why do you have 3 or 4 or 5 little bitty dispatch centers instead of 1 or 2 nice medium-sized ones? So all those conversations going on. That's all just kind of background. When the district approached me, they said, we've tried this before. We think we're at an opportunity where we can do this again. And what they asked me to do is to sit down, exactly what Steve said, to go to the 3 agencies that we initially talked to, ask them for their Christmas wish list, as I called it, in their first meeting. If you had the opportunity to think for the next 20 years for the growth potential of what you do, and that is the city, the county, and the EMA facility, and you had an opportunity to lay out space and size requirements that you would like,
We met with all the agency heads, we had long conversations, we talked through, and we created this first thing that you see on the front page. This is everybody's wish list of what space they would like, and it also gives you an idea of the growth potential that we're looking at over the next period of time. And we'll just run through it real quick so you have kind of a background. So the city asked for a certain amount of space for their dispatch facilities for the police and fire department. They also currently have 8 dispatch positions. They believe that in the future that could grow to 12. I talked about some statistics at our previous work meeting that the number of 911 calls in general for the state of Alabama is on a very upward trend. As the number of devices have filtered out to the market, if we have a wreck on any phone or on any street where we used to get 1 or 2 phone calls, you may now get 6 or 7 or 8. It's the Good Samaritan effect. If it's on an interstate, you may get 20. The reality is every one of those phone calls has to be answered, even if the same unit, the answer that they get is, yes, we're aware of that, and help's on the way, thank you. Yes, we're aware of that. So the pure number of calls are going up. As we chase technology in the 911 world, and people now want to be able to text to 911, they want to be able to send photos of accident scenes to 911. We want to send video, whether we particularly need it or not. The demand for people to sit in a room and handle all of those responses will continue to go up. So that's why we asked the agency directors to think forward. If we're going to look at new construction, let's build something that we're 100% maxed out day one. So the city, you can see, has a growth factor built in. The relative size of the rooms and all of that, at this point in the game, is premature. What we were trying to establish is a baseline size of existing facilities with some growth factor built in. We asked the county to do the same thing. You can see the county spaces in there. We asked the former director and current director at EMA to sit down and go through the same aspect of looking at space that they need with the additional state SRMAC facilities. Because of the nuclear facility that's in your area, there are some additional space requirements for that entity to have a place to operate. The 911 administrative offices, Steve is in a cubbyhole right now, if you haven't had the opportunity to go see where he's working out of. And then we also asked all the agencies to think about the infrastructure, the room with all the computers, the IT data server room. We've tried to size that appropriately, so if the city has some services that they would like to house in there, because we intend for this to be a hardened facility or partially hardened facility, some of it to be, the 3 agencies will have to have data and IT services in those facilities. And then the last thing that we did is we asked all of them to think about common spaces. Everybody has to have restrooms, everybody has to have break rooms, we have to have kitchen spaces because this is a 24/7 facility. We may or may not have a certain amount of bunking for lock-in for long-term events that have to go through there. What Steve and I did is that each agency director gave us their requirements for those. We consolidated the common areas into what we believe is a more unified approach. What we don't want to do is have a kitchen for the EMA and a kitchen for the city and a kitchen for the county. So we did a little bit of adjustment in that. My goal when I talk to the board is to produce a realistic number of the size that your entities have asked for. Is that the right size? It may be, it may not be. Those that hold the dollars and pay for it will ultimately tell us what the proper size of the facility is. So our first task is to try to identify the spaces, what they asked for, and then I think the chairman's had an opportunity to work with Steve a little bit on some space. We will have the same conversations with the city dispatch and with the county dispatch as well. We applied some magic in the backside to what we call gross up areas. Whenever you design a building, there's a certain amount of square footage that's for closets, heater spaces, air conditioning rooms, electrical closets, all of those things that nobody wants to pay for but have to be into the square footage of the building. Generally, what we find when we design facilities like this is the hallways and wall spaces take up an additional 10% of the gross total, so that's where that number came from. All the mechanical spaces, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, water heaters, all the magic, elevators if it's a multi-story facility, that goes into the gross up for the mechanicals. That's about 15%. All said and done, when we're finished with this, we're looking at a 15,500 square foot facility. That may or may not be the ultimate size. We are not saying that that's it. We're saying that We don't think that the facility would be any larger than that based on the 20-year need assessment that was done by all of your agencies. Where the square
For
footage.
you county folks, it was 16,300 and something before Steve Carlisle and I sat down the other day and whittled on it a bit.
There will be other whittles.
Because most of that deduct is coming out of the EMA, since we have to pay for that.
And just the quick reason, 911 funds that are collected in this district, in Dutchess County, can be used for 911 operations and dispatch operations. So that means the city's police department dispatch, the county sheriff dispatch. What they cannot use 911 dollars for are EMA activities. We do have specific rules on both sides of the house about what money can and cannot be commingled. So the reason that we're having this conversation with the county commission specifically is that the county commission will be asked to enter into an arrangement of some design, which would be a long-term facility, that you would cover the cost of the square footage that's exclusively used by EMA. The rules and regulations are somewhat flexible on shared spaces where both agencies can use all of that. So on the next page, we'll run over some little formulas. But the net effect is, and I think I can say this safely, is the intent of the 911 board would be to be the owner of this facility. 911 funds would be used to construct, maintain, and pay for the operating cost of this facility for the 911 administrative services, city dispatch, and the sheriff's dispatch. And the county commission would fund for the construction and the recurring costs associated with the exclusive areas designated to be used by EMA. Those numbers are still to be worked and modeled and adjusted. As I like to say when I go in, if I can start at the top and scare everybody and you don't run out screaming with the number, we're all good to go. The worst thing that I can do is come in and paint a rosy picture and say you can afford something that you cannot afford. So my job is to make sure that I underpromise and overdeliver and not have to come back to this board or another board and say we missed it by a factor of X. Fortunately, we have a lot of construction going on. We've just finished some bidding projects on this exact type of facility. So I am very comfortable with the numbers that I'm quoting in here for this. So having said that, that's the big picture. And as the chairman said, the reason we think this is a good thing because having emergency services in a hardened facility or a partially hardened facility, and what we're doing in other counties is the areas of a building that have to stand in an emergency event, whether it's weather-related or going to be the dispatch areas, the IT infrastructures, the emergency operations centers, and things like that. Steve's office may or may not need to have a 12-inch thick concrete wall and a 6-inch thick concrete roof over his head, unfortunately. Most of the facilities that we're designing right now, not to pick on Steve's office, are what we call a hybrid design. Some percentage of the building is literally a 12-inch thick concrete wall and a 6-inch thick roof covered with a pretty structure so that you don't necessarily know it's a big concrete box underneath it. All of the air conditioner systems, plumbing systems, electrical systems, generators, anything that needs to stay working on a 24/7 basis in a significant natural disaster is in some type of hardened facility to the best of our ability. The office spaces, some of the common areas probably would not be, because you can go take a shower somewhere else necessarily if you had to. You can go pick up an office space somewhere else if you had to. But we need to make sure that the people answering the phone and talking on radios can stay in that box if everything is ripped off the outside of that box. So that's the concept of what we're doing. The chairman asked me a question in the last meeting. I have an answer for you now. The differential currently, based on an architectural firm that's doing 2 projects we're with right now, between a normal construction facility and a hardened is about $60 a square foot. Between 55 and 60, and you know me, I'm always going to say 60. So that's the difference between steel stud wall construction and a veneer of brick or whatever on the outside and a 12-inch solid and a 6-inch over your head, which is generally accepted for an F4 category, type facility. Nobody will put on paper that they've designed anything to survive an F5 because that's pretty tough any way you slice it. So having said that, based on the experience that I have on other projects, and like I said, we're doing this exact thing for Tuscaloosa, their facility is going to be pretty close to the same size as this one. Mobile's rumbling about doing another one down there. So I have one that's going that's about 4,200, one that's about 7,100. Elmo County's going to be about 14,000-ish. It's going to be pretty close to this. So based on the numbers that we're seeing coming back from those projects, on a blended rate, which just means on average in the building, it's going to cost you between $250 and $300 a square foot to construct this type of facility. The range depends on how much of the facility you harden. So I have one facility right now, it's a 7,000 square foot facility, about a third of it, a little over a third of it is hardened. And as of last week, it was at $237 a square foot, and that's with exposed exterior concrete block painted. There's no brick, no pretty, no nothing. That's just, it has been stripped down to the bare essentials.
Are these buildings ever built underground?
Some of them are. Some of them are built partially underground. Huntsville, which is Madison County, is the largest center in the state, which is one of my clients. They are partially bunkered, meaning that if you look at their facility, the dispatch room, which is one big room that has 36 positions in it, is underground slightly, and their exposed office facade that you see from the street is not. If you asked Ernie, the director, if he would do it again that way, actually he wasn't the director at the time, depending on the moisture content and how many leaks you care to deal with over the years, we like to tuck these maybe into a hillside just a little bit, but to be completely underground causes two problems. Number one, it does become a bunker. Number two, it becomes a water issue because of leakage and all that other kind of stuff. And number three, if you have to pump natural sunshine into a facility completely, the people that work in it tend to get really grumpy. So, and not to make light of that, but the answer is you can do it completely underground, but it brings its own set of problems. And what happens is some of your critical infrastructure, like your generators, transformers, things like that, have to be above ground. And you end up hardening that, and it's a net wash on
Right,
it.
defeat the purpose.
Didn't the state DOC partially bunkered them?
That was my next question. The EOC is actually bunkered, right?
In Clanton?
Oh, well, in Clanton.
Yes, it's the
Right.
Clanton facility, if
Clanton
you look
is
at
that-
it, it's cut into a hillside. You
Right.
see the building, but where, if you actually walk in and go past Art's office and go down.
Right.
That's underground.
Right.
One of the things that we've looked at is the preliminary site that we've discussed is that a lot that the city has just past the current dispatch facility, and I'm still turned around in Dothan, I apologize. It does have a slight slope to the lot. We have had preliminary discussions that if we could do a bank and cut into the embankment, tuck it back in. We try to look at prevailing wind patterns. In Tuscaloosa, we're looking at a site right now so that we know the prevailing pattern of weather in Alabama typically is from the southwest to the northeast. So we're looking at a site now that's actually on the hillside, the southwest is this way. We can tuck into it so that we can project over the hillside. So the answer is somewhat. It depends on your water table. It depends on if you can dig down. It depends on what utilities may or not be in the way and all those kind of good things. Generally speaking, it doesn't save you a whole lot of money to go underground because of all the extra stuff you have to do versus building it to the potential that we're talking about above ground. And we can make it look a little prettier on that. The other thing is the architects don't like to work with me. I'm an engineer. I think things in squares, straight lines. And I go to every one of these meetings and I tell the chairman this. I tell them I want a rectangular concrete box. I don't care if it has a window in it except for the front door. I don't have the desire to have something with an edifice with my name on it. My job is to work for you guys behind the scenes, and if we do our job, we make a really nice facility. There is some aesthetic that will have to be applied to this. It's inside the city. It's a large development. It's a lot of money. People are going to go look at it. But what we want to project to them is that we have a nice edifice, but what they don't see underneath the skin is solid concrete. That's what we're going for.
And just to reflect, those of you that have been down or either were paying attention several years ago, we've been down this path. And we had a facility sort of kind of drawn that was really, really nice. I mean, it had marble and it was a pretty facility, about like $15 million or some number like that. Maybe less than that, but anyway. And that didn't happen for obvious reasons. This type of facility is there to provide service, not for public access. So I think the public will be more concerned about us being efficient and whatnot than creating a pretty facility that they'll never see. So it's kind of where he's going now. You know, you'll have the fight with the architects. They always want to pretty it up. And that's why I'm glad we've got him. But also in one of the meetings, the advisory board meeting, I guess Jerry Corbin has a real interest in getting in the middle of this from what I read. Any of y'all at that advisory board meeting?
Yeah, the advisory committee.
Real interest in it.
Jerry has some very distinct opinions about how to deal with architects, and, you know, it's good for us and not good for the architects. So I think between the two, we'll be able to get, you know, a good investment for whatever we spend, should we decide to do this.
And I agree. Steve's known me for a little while, but I don't mind being the bad guy. It doesn't hurt my feelings to go to an architect or somebody and say no. I'm having that discussion with several of them right now. I am here to fight for the user because that's the background that I come from. So as long as we can put the money in the infrastructure, the facility, the redundant systems that need to go in, and unfortunately you don't see that money on a daily basis until the clouds get a little darker than this and the wind starts blowing pretty hard. That's my goal, is to have something for the city and the county that they can know that under most exigent circumstances, you will have a safe facility to operate your emergency communications out, period. If it's pretty after that, more power to it. But that's not my goal, because I don't get paid on a commission basis on how much you spend on that. The architect does. So, having said all that, I'll just kind of whiz through these. I'm sorry.
I have just something to inject in here. From my standpoint, I'm a city commissioner. I would like to see at some point in the future all this together. You know, I don't know, I'm a home builder, and, you know, we start out with a plan, we'll do preliminary set of plans and look at it. When we get a chance to do that, I mean, I can't see any need in putting 2 kitchens or 3 kitchens, stuff like that. This needs to be something that's efficient and workable and, you
Yes.
know,
So
common sense.
we'll jump ahead real quick. Next steps. We talked about this at the last meeting. We can run through the numbers, but it's pretty self-evident. You can flip through there. Let me do this, and I'll answer your question. Essentially, what I tried to show is if we assume that we're going to build the square footage that we're at right now, at the 3 different price points that we're looking at, we know that there will be a radio tower that needs to be constructed. We know that there's site work to be done on that. We know that currently, right now, the ABC, the building commission, cost structure is about 7.8% is the current architectural fee for this style and this grade of building. So there's about 7.8% of fees that would go into this. Construction management, which is stuff like I do, is generally between 2 and 2.5 points, where I'm the guy with the baseball bat beating on everybody to make sure they do their job and they deliver what they've promised. We put a plug number in for FF&E, fixtures, furnishing, and equipment. This would be anything exclusive of Steve's EMA facility, because I can't buy anything for him with 911 dollars. I'm spending 911 dollars on this side of the pot. This is desks, 911 dispatch consoles, TVs on the wall, any of the accoutrement that doesn't get built into the hard structure of the facility. So that's all the stuff.
That would include furnishings for our communications center, so that's stuff.
County, sheriff's communication, yes.
Yeah.
So when we refer to the 2 different operating groups, one is the city communications,
Right.
the sheriff's communications is in the same facility.
Right.
That is all covered and available to be used and planned to be used for 911 money. Is $200,000 enough for that? It depends on how big the building ends up being. I'm trying to throw some ballpark numbers in there based on what we've spent in the past. You know, every 911 dispatch console can range from $5,000 to $15,000, depending on if you want it to go up and down and blow cold air and warm air on you and all the goodies that go along with it. So we tried to draw kind of a midpoint line. That number with a 10% construction contingency fee, even though we all like to think we're really good and we're going to have a third-party estimator look at everything before we go through any phase like that, we all slip every once in a while. You can either say that there's a 5% design contingency and a 5% construction. It's just easier to say it's 10% and be done with it. If you don't use it, we all look like heroes. If it's there and we don't go over it, you're okay. We didn't make anybody mad. When you add those numbers up, you're looking at about 5.3 million at the low end to 6.3 million at the high end. It's about $1 million swing, depending on the per square foot cost. And that is almost exclusively dependent upon how much of that building is hardened and how much is not. We don't know that answer. I wanted to make sure that everybody on both sides of the world that's paying for this understands that these are very realistic numbers. The county has made an innovation that any site work, grub out, pack fill, bore sampling, all that kind of good stuff that we lump into site work would be, there was an offer extended for the county to participate in those services at their expense. That,
Not an official offer.
No, this is-
Folks aren't aware of it.
there's
But I
nothing
mean,
official.
I mentioned it anyway.
Yeah, there's nothing official at this point, but it does make sense that if the county engineering facilities have the ability to do base site work, it may be more cost effective to do it that way than to commercially bid it out.
And better for us sometimes to do that than it is to pay money. So.
Correct. There may be some trade-out options along the way in there. When it's all said and done, if there's some credits applied, the construction contingency fee, you're still looking at, $5.2 to $6.1 million in that range. The 911 board has assets that they intend to apply some percentage of those to a down payment. I arbitrarily picked a number, and I did that so that we could have some discussions on debt service. I arbitrarily picked a $2 million down payment by the 911 board. I have not discussed that with the 911 board. I want to make sure everybody understands that's Lee just saying that here's a number that's probably in the ballpark, and so everybody can see what debt service would be. We go from there. At the second page, or the bottom of the third page, where it says EMA space in the building, this is where we went in, and the exclusive space, we all know that's on the first page. We went back and did just a quick analysis of the shared spaces, which are basically kitchens, bathrooms, bunk rooms, things like that. And how do we apportion that between the EMA and the two other agencies? You can see it on there. This is a swag. The chairman and I have a difference of opinion on the kitchens. But the ballpark is, currently EMA has about 520 square feet of kitchen/break room. And that's not just a kitchen. That's where everybody's got tables to come in, eat, sit, decompress, all the above. The 911 facility, if EMA did not exist in this facility, would have to have some form of kitchen/break space. The facility in the 7,000 square foot facility has a dispatch room that'll hold 8 positions, and it has a 149 square foot kitchen drum.
So
Kitchen/break room.
So that's half of ours, so you double that, it's 300, that's what I said. 300.
Well, no, you said, well, the EMA, this is where we get into nuts and bolts. If you've got 520 now and that makes you happy,
Now, see, you're going about it the wrong way.
Well, I know.
You gotta look at what we'll have this conversation later. Let me just say, I hope you get that 27% down.
right. Lee picked a number and said,
Yeah.
it's this many percentage points that the EMA would cover, and it's this many for the other two.
We'll
That's
figure that out later.
That's a detailed discussion, but what we tried to show is that for legal purposes, we have to show that there is a thought process so that the 911 dollars can't be spent on fixed or recurring dollars for EMA. That's what it amounts to. We can discuss the individual percentages. As the chairman correctly pointed out, obviously, the bigger percentage that the EMA is responsible for long-term costs you money. So when it comes down to the time to make that decision, and this is not it, there will be some significant discussions between participants. Lee may excuse himself because as far as I've lived from here, I can't see this building when I'm done. But we will come to the right size. How about that?
We will not let that stand in the way.
Right.
But we'll get it
A
down to
couple of
what-
square
We'll get
feet.
it down to what it needs to be.
Right, a couple of square feet is not going to make a difference. So as we move through this, essentially the contribution from the county is going to be roughly between $1 million and $1.2 million, $2.5 million, $3 million, depending on how many square feet we agree to use on common space and things like that. So the amount that was financed on behalf of 911 would be $2.1 million to $2.8 million. The concept is if 911 is going to pass a revenue bond or flood revenue bond, which is the most likely way to pay for this, because a revenue bond does not have to go to public placement. It could be a private placement facility, and we can get into the mechanics of how do you finance operations like this. But I have a client that just completed revenue bond, so I'm very familiar with the mechanics of how that works. these numbers reflect what you would see in the real world. A 20-year bond is roughly at the 3% and just below interest rate on the open market right now. A 30-year bond is 3% to just a little bit above. The quality of the underlying protection has a little bit to do with a little bit to go with the rate that you get, but because 911 had a change in our law, we are guaranteed revenue for the next 5 years. We have a minimum guaranteed revenue. So from a revenue bond perspective, the rating agencies look at that guarantee, and that is the overriding factor that they're using to rate it now, not necessarily the credit worthiness of the operation. As long as that revenue is earmarked and guaranteed, there is a surplus so that they meet covenants to make sure that there's comfort level. It's easier to do revenue bonds right now because you don't have to worry about how much is the dirt worth. There's no lien on the building. You're purely attaching, and those of you who have worked in county and city government have done revenue bonds, so you know how that works. The discussions at this point would be that the 911 board would probably be the holder, or would be the issuer of that, and there would be some mechanical and financial structure worked out between the county commission and the 911 board for the payment of the yearly debt service that's associated with the cost of the EMA part of the building. Long sentence, but you get it. Basically, 911's going to borrow all the money. The county would effectively make the yearly payment of the piece that is exclusively for EMA. Structurally, that's how it's done in most other places. Talladega County does a very similar operation. They have a joint, except that the county actually issued the bond back in the day because of some other reasons there, but it's the one that we just completed, the 911 board issued the revenue bond, and we did not have any trouble, and we had very low closing costs, so that, from a financial structure, that's probably how it would work.
And we want to be sure that our commitment doesn't impact our debt limit or debt load for this, well, it won't be this year anyway.
Correct.
This is probably an 18-month, or at least a year process.
From the time we hire an architect, this is, for a facility this size, this is at least an 18, probably closer to 20, 22-month project.
Okay, so we're talking 2 years down the road before we actually start all this. But, you know, the concept, and I don't, we're going to be sure to find out if or not we can do it, but what I was thinking was that we would actually, whatever our allocated debt and maintenance amount would be, we would actually lease space from the E911 board, you know, enter into a 30-year lease with them so that it's not, you know, it's not a payment of bond debt, it's a lease. We're just leasing space, and like if we were leasing part of the Houston Hotel or whatever that, it's in my age now, but that building, that
Yeah.
thing. So,
And all of that is to be determined with the financing entity, and that's, we're very preliminary, but that is agreed. That's the concept.
that would be the
we're
best
working
scenario because it would be clean.
at. Right. And so just to give you an idea, if you look at the yearly payment section, you can see it's broken out. The debt service that EMA would be responsible for at the 3 per square foot levels for the 20 and 30, and the debt service that the 911 board would be responsible for at the 3 debt levels. These are representative numbers. You should have put lots of asterisks on it. These are Lee's numbers. These are not real, but this is to give you a scope and size that I feel comfortable that would be a not to exceed number. So having said that, the other portion of this is the recurring cost estimates that the 911 board would have to operate this facility. There's insurance, power, heat, light, water, sewer, all those kind of things. We've put some numbers together there. These numbers are high. I will own up to that. But again, my job is to make sure that if I don't scare you out of the room day one, then we're all good. But the county commission would also be, part of their financing arrangement would be a calculated portion of the operating cost of the facility that would roughly equal the exclusive square footage that you occupy.
Which would probably be similar to what the costs are now. I mean, you know, that courthouse is not a very efficient building, so it might even come in better, but, you know, we're paying electricity and maintenance and insurance. We're paying stuff now, we'd just be paying stuff over there, so it'd just be transferred.
And I will say this, when you get down to the nitty-gritty between two entities that either have a lease arrangement or some type of financing arrangement, that is when you actually would enumerate the explicit utilities and recurring costs that you would have a share in. So there would be a binding document that states that you have 24.6% of the footprint. Next step is to share 50%, which is where the sub-trades have detailed design documents. We come back, it gets another approval ultimately from the board, because they're paying for it. If there are any value engineering options that need to be done at that point, we do that between 35 and 50%. 50 to the last point is essentially creating construction and bid documents. So that's the steel, the wood, the sub, all of the mechanical that makes a book this thick gets built. The third stop sign is design and bid documents. They hand you a roll of prints and a big spec book and say it's ready to go to the street. So that's the third point at which the board would have an opportunity to do exactly what you said, make a determination on that. Once you've released it to the street, and if you make an award, then you are committed to produce, the dollars to continue the contract. The general contractor will also have to purchase the insurance bond at that point to make sure that we have a completion document in case he goes away. We can complete it with someone else. So generally speaking, there are between 3 and 4 stop points where you will know your cost that you have built up to that point before you commit to construct this facility. And architects, I'll say one more thing and I'll be quiet. Architects are professionals. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. He already knows it. Architecture services are professional services just like mine, and in the state of Alabama, under the bid law that 911 works under, you do not have to produce a bid document or an RFP for professional services. What I have recommended to the advisory committee is that we pick a reasonable number of firms that have experience in this field, because this is not a standard office building. This is not a standard school. There are not that many of these constructed over time, and there are things that are unique in its requirement that sometimes we have to explain 3 or 4 times to the engineering groups to make sure they understand us on. My suggestion was that we create a list of 4, 5, or 6 people. We bring them down for about a 45-minute get acquainted session. Generally, we ask a firm to bring whoever would be the project architect and the project manager with them, introduce them to us, tell us about their process, tell us what buildings like this have you done in the past. We look at all those people over a day or a day and a half, and then we pick one. That's all there is to it. Sometimes you get a good feel, sometimes you don't get a good feel.
Will then be recommended to the
district
So the
board.
advisory committee or subcommittee, if it is one of those, would get together and add the pluses and the minuses up and say, we get a good feeling about this firm. They've done this many, or they're local, or they're big, or they're small, or I feel whatever makes us all feel happy in that committee. That committee would then make a recommendation back to the district board. If the district board approves that, we enter into a contract with the architect, and we take all of these numbers and rooms, and we start drawing on paper. That is the next step. However, my admonishment is, don't start this process. If any number at this bottom line gives you hesitation that you could adequately fund. There's a project going on right now, and thankfully I'm not on that one, that they have drawn the drawings, have the building, and it's 75% more than they thought it was going to cost them. And now there's gnashing of teeth and pointing of fingers. And my job is...
5% more, well, they didn't have a good estimate at the start.
They didn't hire me. That's the only pitch I'll make. So anyway, that is a difficult situation, and not to draw a parallel because I was not involved the first time, but it may have been something similar to the first effort here. I don't know, but that's tough. When you get to that position and you've gone down that road and everybody's gotten excited, I'm going to have all this wonderful stuff. I tell everybody, I said, if you have a drop tile ceiling, which we have beautiful plaster ceilings here, look up, and every one of those 2x2 tiles is $1,000 at the low end, on average, $250 a square foot. 4 square feet and 2x2 tile. So when you're in your office and you go, that's how much your office costs to build, or your break room, or your bunk room, or your kitchen, or your restroom with 12 stalls, or whatever. And that's kind of one of those where everybody goes, oh, yeah, okay, I got it. That's where we are. And now I will be quiet for a moment.
Yeah, they're gonna be, like he said, and we've been talking over the last week back and forth, and I feel like I'm splitting hairs, but, you know, a percent here or there saves the county pretty significant money, so I wanna be sure we're only paying for what we need to be paying for, and there's some things, the $150,000 you got in the wrong place, but we'll figure that out later, but that's neither here nor there. But, you know, I think it's been discussed to the point of ad nauseum, and, you know, the advisory committee is ready to move forward. The climate between the two law enforcement agencies is at a point where we're ready to move forward as opposed to the past. And that's important. You know, I think many of us believe that one day, whether we're here or not, one day, rather than having a comm center here and a comm center here with a wall down the middle, as I've been kidding, I say, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, you know, so that we end up with one comm center that the E911 district board operates, and, you know, you call, you get somebody at that office. You don't get a county person or a city person. You get somebody at that office, and so this has got to be designed so that we can remove that wall.
I agree with that.
But, and from our cost, I mean, we're looking at, you know, if you look at these figures, $120,000 or so, but as I said, we have some of those costs already. We pay the electricity in our comm center now that will be in the E911 percentage, so, you know, there's a little savings there. We'll move out of a building that we'll have to do something with. So, I mean, there's offsets. It's I mean, don't want to mislead you, it's going to cost money to do it. But at the same time, you know, we had some discussion the other day about whether we do a 20 or 30 year issue, and, you know, somebody in the city was thinking we needed to go 20 years, and I think some of us were thinking 30 would be better, just to be sure from the cash flow perspective, because the building will be there in 30 years, you know, which will lower our costs too. So all these things we've got to work out, and we're not asking county commission, we're not asking Monday to approve plans or you know, anything. We're asked in that letter to approve the concept to move forward with the next phase. We'll have stops along the way that we can always get out if we need to. And like I say, we're talking about money that we're going to spend 2 years from now. So hopefully we'll all still be here, all of us that are elected. But, you know, there's always that potential we won't even be here. You know, we got to get moving on it, and so this is the way to do it. What this information, you can see why I didn't want to have this discussion in the admin meeting tomorrow, but this information has a lot of stuff in it, and if you got questions, now's the time certainly to ask them, city or county folks. And I appreciate you two guys. You know do you know all these people? Do they introduce you to you?
We shook hands on the way in, so
Well, you got
I think.
every other person is a county commissioner, so I get that in. and the second gentleman and Albert are city commissioners.
I understand.
And then Bill is our chief administrative officer. I think y'all
This
met
this
him.
was the beloved commissioner, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a self-imposed title.
No, I do understand.
Yeah. But, so anyway, now's the time if you have questions to ask and about the process and all that. And, I mean, you know, honestly, this is something we've got to do. We've got some other issues facing us, and we've talked about that. You know, we're going to have some serious discussions down the way about just things that we need to do as a county commission. But does anybody have any? Let me just ask this: does anybody have any significant objections to to us moving in this direction or questions about the direction. Not about the specifics, but about the direction we're talking about. Jackie's probably seen more of this than the other two of you because of the E911 board we serve on. But, you know, again, my hope, since we're talking about long-range hope, my hope is that we at some point change that board to be made up of people that know about, and basically take the part of the advisory board, maybe mix in a couple of free elected, and let that be the E911 board that knows something instead of, I mean, that's the 9 of us we're glad to be there, glad to vote on what's presented to us, but, you know, we don't know about next generation radio equipment stuff, so. Any questions or any concerns? That's what I guess what I'm looking for.
I really like the idea that you put an expert in that's got expertise in this, rather than just putting somebody off the wall.
Well, I didn't do
really
that.
like
The
that.
advisory board did that.
With
Thank you, by the way.
With the new comm center, are you looking at a lot of new equipment, or would the equipment we're using now be sufficient?
Fabulous question. So this is purely Lee's answer. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstance, if at all financially possible, pick any piece of old equipment up out of an operating facility and carry it to a brand new building. That's in an ideal world. The reality is the 911 equipment, which is in currently an arrangement with CenturyLink, they provide that on a lease arrangement. It's referred to as hosted equipment. That system has a end of life that's already been announced, and so within the next 2 years, miraculously, we will need to do something with your physical 911 equipment,
Whether we move or not.
whether we move or not.
What
Whether
kind
we
of
move or
expense
not.
is that?
That's 911.
Unknown.
It depends, and it depends on whether the relationship continues where the system that you currently have in the CenturyLink building, which is over there somewhere, down that way, there's a room with a big box in it with lots of the red blinking lights that is the actual 911 switch. They offer service where they have one switch and they sell service off of that to several counties in the Wiregrass area. That model, we're not sure if they're going to continue, if they're going to replace that equipment and continue to offer that service model in a hosted fashion, or if it might make more financial sense for the board to look at purchasing their own physical equipment and hosting it in this building, because the cost of the actual equipment has come down dramatically, because it's all off-the-shelf equipment now. It's just magical software that makes it all work. That will be a discussion to be had in the next year during this design process. Like I said, whether this facility goes forward or not, as the chair appropriately said. So, number one, the 911 equipment, one way or the other, hopefully you can make it line up so that by the time the building finishes, you've got new 911 equipment. Radio infrastructure is more of an opportunity for the agencies that use it to look at where do they want to be in 18 to 24 months. And because I'm not real privy to how the 911 board may or may not participate in the radio infrastructure, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth on that. So,
Shoot, we buy intercom.
string is what we do.
Just had to get that.
However, sometimes the radio infrastructure, the stuff that's out on the towers and all that is fine, and all you may replace is the actual computer that the dispatcher sits in front of, clicks on the mouse that actually transmits back and forth. Again, because I don't know how the board participates in cost sharing, if they do, with any radio infrastructure. Typically, the user agencies are more responsible for their radio equipment, because as I like to tell folks, there was sheriff's departments and police departments and fire departments, and they all had radios and towers and repeaters long before there was 911. So that is an opportunity to have a discussion to see what all can be done with that.
Yeah, we've got to be sure that our radio, and we may have, the 911 stuff, the thought would be, we pick up and they go sit down over there in front of new equipment. That'd be the panacea. The radios, they may have to take with them because, quite honestly, a lot of that has to do with communicating with volunteers and agencies, and asking them. We just went through a change with them. Asking them all to change radios is difficult with this. So a lot of that may have to go. But
And in round numbers, just to answer your question, if we assume that we would have, we'd have 12 positions, currently have 8 positions at the city and 4 positions at the county. And if we didn't have any growth, we just put in a 12-position brand-new 911 system in Elmore County this year, and it had a few extra bells and whistles, and it was about $350,000.
There's this
Just to
stuff
give you
called
a-
Next Gen that I just mentioned a minute ago. I
And
mean,
we're all
they're
in it
going to
now.
this thing where you can text in 911 calls, you can, I don't know what else, but
We're actually building an entirely new 911 infrastructure, or we're moving to it right now, where